right. Good morning, Mike. How are you today?
Jeremy, I'm hanging in. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We have gathered here today, you and I, and perhaps some innocent bystanders, to talk about how to register a domain name. A domain name for a website that, you could do anything with. And the point of this is to show people how to do that. If you got a great idea for a website and you want to register that domain and get it hosted, we are going to do that in less than 30 minutes, maybe something like that, if we're lucky.
I think we should be well under 30 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how are we going to do this? The first step, you're on this site here that tells me that we're going to be registering a domain name, but we got to find it first, right?
That's correct. So what you're looking at on my browser here is hover.com. They are a domain name registrar. One of many. You can buy a domain name for your site in many different services. Hover, GoDaddy, Google has one. There's dozens out there. This is just one that I sort of arbitrarily prefer. And really the first step to buying a domain is finding one. This is essentially finding a piece of real estate on the web, a name that is not taken that you can use. So for our purposes, we're going to look for a domain to use for Gymnasium.
Okay.
And so we're going to pop in
And
Gymnasium.
hold on, just 1 second, Mike. We should make it clear that, again, as you mentioned, that we don't have any relationship with Hover. We don't know them. They're just a nice site. Call me.
Spot on. Yes. That's right. Give us a call. So, we're always open to things.
Yeah.
Hover, if you want to give us a shout.
Yeah.
We're looking for a domain for Gymnasium from Hover. And so really the first step is to kind of search for available domains. So Hover will come back and return loads and loads of different domain options that have the word Gymnasium in them. It takes a few seconds because it's searching a boatload of different top-level domains. The top-level domain is what comes after the dot, essentially, in the domain name. So we could get gymnasium.online, gymnasium.net, gymnasium.global. What we have found in sort of the style of a cooking show, I looked beforehand, and I think what we're going to snap up today is gymnasium.work.
Okay.
So the process to do that is pretty easy. You click the plus button to add it to your cart. And just like most of your online shopping experiences, it will be added to a cart, and then you have to go through the purchase process. So we're there. I'm going to scroll to the top of the screen. And
Now, these days, again, back in the day, when we were registering domains, we had 3 choices. There was .com, .org, maybe .edu if you're lucky, a couple others. But now there's gazillions. That's a word?
there
Gazillion.
There are tons, yeah. At some point, the powers that be opened up the top-level domain to companies to register top levels that they thought were useful. So there are ones for countries, there are ones for, you can see on the right-hand side here, all these different sort of subcategories of domains. Mm-hmm. There are many, many more than people are aware of. One of my favorite podcasts has a domain that's .limo, because Why wouldn't .limo be a top-level domain?
Excellent. So we got gymnasium.work.
That's right. So we're going to go to our cart and purchase the thing. I may go dark for just a second so that I don't share my credit card number on screen, but the process is exactly what you would expect. You choose a duration to register for. We're going to start with 1 year. We're going to register this for the grand total of $11.17. That price, of course, will vary based on how long you register for and which domain you choose. So the prices vary pretty wildly from $6 to, I don't know, actually thousands of dollars for a domain if it's something that's super desirable and somehow still available. Right. So I'm going to run through the checkout process. Let me do that on another screen here real quick.
Yeah, feel free to just to read out your number out loud too if you're hiding it.
Yeah, actually it's the same as the password for my luggage, 12345. There we go. So I'm brought back to this site that says, thanks for choosing Hover, your order is complete. So now I can click manage my domain, and at this point I own gymnasium.work, which means I now have this reserved web address that I can use for my purposes, and the next step is sort of to figure out what to do with it.
Okay.
So we're going to use gymnasium.work for the time being. It's going to be just a very simple website we're going to set up with a simple HTML page, that just says something like gymnasium.work on it. And we're going to show you how to set it up using a web hosting service called Netlify.
Okay. So basically our goal here is just to see this puppy live, right? We just want to see something on a page and make sure that anyone who types in gymnasium.work is going to see this
That's right.
masterpiece that we're about to create.
So if right now I went to gymnasium.work, it's kind of just a placeholder page. Hover knows that one of their customers owns it, and they're showing me this, hey, this is awesome, but it's being worked on. Check back later. Okay. You've probably seen these before in various places on the web. We want to take it from something that Hover has as a placeholder to something that has a web page that I've built, that I've hosted. So that's the plan here.
Cool.
So my next step is to create a place to keep the source code for my web page. I'm going to create this on GitHub. GitHub is where we'll hold the HTML source code that will eventually be this web page. We're going to do that by clicking New to create a new repository, and we're going to create a repository under this organization called Gymnasium Work. And I'm going to leave all this stuff. We'll even make this public. There's no reason for this to be private. I'm going to leave everything else as it is and click Create Repository. That will give me sort of the empty workspace to put my source code in for what will become gymnasium.work. Okay, so we've created the repository. We're going to fire this up in GitHub Desktop. So I'm going to click this button here that says Set Up in Desktop, which will prompt me to open GitHub Desktop. And on my GitHub Desktop, let me drag that onto this screen. Sorry, gotta click it again. Click clone. What it gives me is my blank Gymnasium workspace. This is the blank repository.
So basically, you just created a folder.
That's it. It's an empty folder to put source code in.
Okay.
So from here, I'm going to open Visual Studio Code, which is my source code editor of choice, which will allow me to create files, edit files that we can then push up to GitHub.
Okay. So from like the high-level view, you just created a folder. Now we need to create something to go into the folder.
That's right. So to do that, I'm going to do a new file. We're going to name this file index.html, and I'm going to populate it with a very basic, very, very, very basic HTML page. Make that lowercase. It's going to be this is gymnasium.work. And we're going to put a hammer emoji there.
Nice.
One thing you may not know about me, Jeremy, is I absolutely hate when people say welcome to blah, blah, blah.
Really?
On their website. I am so allergic to that.
You don't like to be welcomed.
That's right. I don't need to be welcomed on the internet. So we're going to save this file as index.html, which is sort of the standard for this is the HTML file that will be the thing that is accessed when someone goes to this site. So now Visual Studio has gone in and given me the nice formatting around this. It's a super bare bones web page right now, but that should be plenty to get us started.
Okay.
So we're going to switch back to GitHub Desktop. We're going to say create index.html as our commit message, which is just sort of a note to leave that says this is what this little bit of work was for. I'm going to hit commit to master, and then I'm going to publish this branch to GitHub. And in a moment, it should be moved then from my local computer where I've created this index.html file and synced with GitHub and pushed to the web.
So again, kind of the analogy is, again, in my old school days, this was the equivalent of creating a file locally and then using an FTP server to transfer that file to a remote hosting service somewhere. But we're not doing any of that. We're skipping that, really. This is like hosting 2.0?
Yeah, maybe even beyond that at this point. In the new world, it's a lot easier to host a website.
All right.
But truthfully, in the background, what's happening isn't too different. So basically, GitHub will be the place where our source code lives. So I'm going to go and refresh this repository, and now we have our index.html here, which has my commit message, create index.html. And if I open it, we'll see this is gymnasium.work with my little hammer emoji there. So now we have our source code on the web on GitHub, which is going to be where we keep the source code. The next thing is to connect this bit of source code up to a domain. And so there are a couple of different ways, well, there are many different ways you can do that. For the sake of this example, we're going to use a app hosting service called Netlify, which is has a lot of really nice features for previewing and working collaboratively with other people, for pushing your source code to different apps that you can view and preview and approve before you set them out into the real world. But if you happened to have watched our tutorial on setting up a GitHub Pages website, you could also use a GitHub Pages site to use your custom domain. And it's not too difficult to do. Basically, if you want to enable GitHub Pages, you would do that down here. And after you enable your GitHub Pages site, there's an option to use a custom domain. And it would appear in this GitHub Pages section, I believe.
Cool. And for those of you watching, we'll put a link to that GitHub Pages tutorial here. Maybe. I'm just pointing to the sky.
Piece of cake. Yeah, point in a direction. It'll be over there.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we have our domain purchased, we have source code created, so we have our index.html that we want that domain to show. The next step is to sort of create the glue in between the two, where we say this domain maps to this source code by pointing to this app. So for that, we're going to use Netlify.
So currently, still the internet still does not know that you have this folder with that HTML file in it, right? So we basically have to kind of point the file to an address. Correct?
That's exactly right. Yep. Yeah. So there's a two-step process for that. Again, we have to hook the source code up to the web app, and then we have to hook the domain name up to that running web app. So we're going to do the source code side first, and then the domain name side after that.
Okay.
So new site from Git on Netlify. We've already created an account. Netlify does a really good job of interpreting what's in your repository and doing all the work it needs to set up the web server and the backend nonsense. In the case of an index.html file, it's very simple and super basic, but if you had something like a React site or a PHP site or a Django site or whatever, they have loads of different templates that they automatically apply to your site to be able to host it. So we're going to use our GitHub repo. So we're going to click GitHub here. It's going to say, hey, which repo do you want to hook this up to? And we're going to select Gymnasium here. And I have to give the Netlify app access to that, which shouldn't be too hard.
And so we should kind of mention as you're doing that, so that there is a little bit of obviously prep work that we didn't show here about, signing up for Netlify and connecting your accounts and all that. But for the most part, so we're assuming that that has been done already.
That's right. And it's worth mentioning, too, that Netlify is free to start, at least.
Right.
They do have paid features, but their free tier should be more than plenty to get you started with exactly what we're showing here. So the entire cost of what we're doing is just buying the domain, which in this case was $12 or whatever that cost.
Right. And so that we should probably mention that is another benefit of the whole reason that we're doing this is that, again, the traditional way of doing this is you pay a certain amount of money to register the domain. And then typically you pay a hosting service to host that. And that can run anywhere from, $5 a month to hundreds, depending on how robust and strong you want that to be. In this situation, we're kind of doing an end run around all of that. And essentially we paid for the domain. And then the GitHub and Netlify services that we're showing now have free tiers. So we basically are getting away with creating a website, so a domain and a website for whatever we paid, which was $10, $12, something like that.
Yeah, totally right. So now we have to tell Netlify that we want to look at this repo that we created. So we've got our Gymnasium work in here. I'm going to click that. It's going to say, do some introspection and look at that repository to see what's in there. It knows we've got a master branch. It's going to deploy that. We don't need a build command or a publish directory in this case. So we're just going to hit deploy site, and Netlify will go and look at the code that was in there because it's now connected to GitHub. It'll go and run and deploy, and we can even look at that deploy, which should be very, very short in this case. The site is already live, but basically it took our index.html and put it on a running web app that it's exposed to the public internet. And the only downside at this point is that the web app that it's got facing the public internet is at cockypike4909f.netlify.com.
And I should point out too, right? Like, I look at this stuff that just happened, these last two steps, and I have no idea what it does or means, and that's kind of irrelevant in many ways, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're someone like Mike who works on the developer side of things more often than not, then these things make more sense. But for most folks, it's just clicking the button, accept, confirm, right?
Yeah, you really don't need to know how most of this stuff works because it works so well. And that's one of the reasons I really like Netlify. So if I click this URL here, it's going to bring us to a new tab. And that new tab will show exactly the code that we wrote before. So this is a header with this is gymnasium.work and our little hammer.
Oh, dude,
that's great.
You made a typo.
Did I?
Yep. You got to start this whole tutorial over again, buddy.
No.
Sorry.
Well, that's great. Well, we can even show off how to fix that. That's super funny.
All right.
So again, part of the problem here, apart from the typo, is that this URL isn't great. The good news is we've purchased a domain name that we want to use for this, so we're now going to map that domain name to here.
Okay.
So how do we do that? Well, we click on Settings.
So I should mention here too, right? So, but what you're saying, if I understand this correctly, is the site is technically live. It just has that very, very obscure URL that we would never use, but it actually is on the internets.
That's right.
Cool.
Yep.
All right.
It's public. Anyone in the world with this crazy URL could visit this right now. So what we want to do is domain management in settings on Netlify to map our custom domain to it. And to do that, we click this button that says Add Custom Domain. We're going to type in gymnasium.work. It's work and not works, right?
Just work, yeah. Single.
Yeah. We're going to hit Verify, and it's going to give us some... Oh, well, we don't want to add another domain, so we're going to say no. Oops. Did I misspell that too? Gymnasium.work. We're going to hit Verify. It should say, this already has an owner. Is it you? Yes, add domain. Sorry, I misread that before. Yeah, we want to hit yes. And now it's going to give me some work to do to confirm that this is my domain. So it's sort of a security thing that once you buy a domain, you have to do some work in the background to say, hey, yeah, this is my domain, so please do point it to this place on the internet where I want to show. So if we click on check DNS configuration, it'll tell me exactly what I need to do to set that up. So I need to put in one of these two things, a name or alias record that points gymnasium.work to the URL that we had talked about before, or to the IP address behind that URL. So again, this is one of those things where if you don't really know what that means, you don't need to know what it means. It's a relatively simple step that can be confusing to read through. So we'll show you how that works. So I'm going to go back to Hover, where we purchased the domain. We're going to click on this DNS tab. And over here is where we have all of the DNS. So this is sort of like the Yellow Pages lookup for what happens when someone types gymnasium.work into their URL bar in their browser. Okay.
And if I remember correctly from my past dealings with this, that number there is the IP address, the one that starts with 64. So that actually is it's like an address. We could type that into the browser and it would go to that page. And
yes,
but we're
we'll
really
very likely see the same thing.
So we're just kind of connecting the dots, so to speak.
Yep. Okay. So now instead of that 6498, this number here is pointing at Hover's servers. We want to say, no, when you go to anything at gymnasium.work, we want to point to this Netlify server. So to do that, I'm going to click Edit here. And I'm just going to change that domain name to the one they recommended. So I copied that. I will paste it here, hit Save Changes. And I'm going to do the same thing for this @ record. So I'll paste in my new domain, hit Save Changes. And now within a few minutes, that should update. So we can come in here and close this and even possibly refresh this. And it might see it straight away.
And so there are sometimes lags, right? It takes time for all of these services to kind of catch up with each other. And if you're lucky, it will happen relatively instantly. But sometimes there are delays.
Yeah, we lucked out in this case. It worked straight away.
Woohoo.
So if I open this in a new tab, now gymnasium.work is coming soon. Oh no. Well,
so
Yeah, if I refresh, it's still the same thing. So it may take a few minutes for this to work through,
right.
but basically all of the address books and the sort of background of the internet there are working to update themselves.
Well, Mike, while we're waiting, there is this little issue of the typo. Just
I
wondering.
thought you might bring that up.
I mean, I'm just saying.
We can fix that typo.
Just saying.
Sure. So let's switch back over to VS Code where I was working on this before. I'm going to fix my typo by typing an M there, gymnasium.org, verifying with my good friend Jeremy that there are no more typos in this file.
That's kind of what I'm here for.
I wish you were here before. We're going to come back to GitHub desktop and say, Jeremy missed a typo.
Thank you.
In our commit message. We'll commit that to master, and we're going to push that up to GitHub.
Okay.
Now, when we do that, this is the really cool thing about Netlify is it is listening to GitHub for that, and it's going to wait for that code to make its way up to master in GitHub, and it's basically listening to GitHub for those changes. So once that change occurs, it will automatically redeploy the site, and that redeploy happened faster than I could get here.
That's cool.
So it's gone and taken that new file and done all this magic that you don't really need to understand what any of these messages say. The important bit here is if I hit preview deploy, once again, there we go. This is gymnasium.org.
Dude, I think we just accidentally created a teaching moment that, was completely planned. And
that's right. Serendipitous. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's really awesome. So basically, it's like we've created this ripple effect, this ability to connect again all the dots. We make a change on our local desktop, gets thrown over to GitHub, or I should say Netlify realizes it's like listening to GitHub, basically.
That's exactly right.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then as soon as it sees a change, it's just like, blah, here we go, let's make it live, right?
Yep. Updated in real time. Yeah.
Man, that's awesome.
That's all it takes. So I think we're probably under the half hour that I promised.
Yeah, because you're on the real you're on the real URL now. It's working.
It works. Everything's there.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. We're done,
So
right?
what more could you ask for? Yeah, we have a public web page. Any updates I make to this thing will show up on the web, and I can keep using the same workflow. So any other changes I need, I can go back to Visual Code. I can push them to master. They'll go to GitHub, and Netlify will find them from that change on master.
And we did it in record time, and also we did it essentially for just the cost of the domain.
Yep.
All right. Now we need to put some stuff on there. So let's get to work.
Sounds good.
All right, Mike. Well, this was awesome. Very cool. And of course, this is just the beginning, right? There are so many steps that we could go from at this point. Even on the back end in terms of setting other things up. So what, again, just, without going into them necessarily, like what might be some of the things that we could then do in terms of, making this a more robust workflow? Like if this was like a production site.
Yeah. So one of the things I really like about Netlify is the way that it works with GitHub.
Okay.
Is that if you you and I were collaborating on this site, you could submit a pull request to my GitHub repo, and Netlify would automatically deploy your pull request in parallel to the site. So it wouldn't make it public, but it would give me what's called a preview deploy, where I could see the work that you've done on a public URL and approve it or choose to ask you for changes. And if I merge that code, it'll then go and merge that into the production site. That's a really nice workflow that you get for free with Netlify.
That's cool, and that actually sounds to me like a future tutorial.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much. This is, you've just watched the master in action, Mike Bifulco, or Mike B, as I like to call him. Go through the gymnastics of creating a domain, or registering a domain, getting it hosted, publishing it live in less than 30 minutes. Amazing. Bang. Well, thank you, Mike. I look forward to doing this again. Adieu, everybody.
Until next time.
Take care.